It's just ignore all this feminist bollocks, and every time they start complaining, you know, women about their position, just go like, and just do what you want to do, you know. Don't say, I can't be in a band, just go and do a band, you know.
She wore a dead swan to the Oscars and laid eggs on the red carpet. She beat a journalist unconscious in a Bangkok airport while her 9-year-old son watched. A man in Florida built a sulfuric acid bomb to disfigure her face, then shot himself on camera when it was done. She accused one of Europe's most celebrated directors of sexual harassment. And through all of it, every headline, every outrage, every breathless tabloid close-up, she kept making music so strange and so luminous that Radiohead heard it and scrapped their entire sound. Björk is, depending on whom you ask, either the most radical artist of the last 40 years or the most misunderstood woman in pop culture. If you only have 30 seconds, here's the bottom line of this video. Björk became the face of art and music, not by trying to be weird, but by refusing to be anything she wasn't. She treated her own strangeness as raw material, the Icelandic accent, the volcanic temper, the obsession with glaciers and code, and the mechanics of the human heart, and built an empire of sound and image that nobody could copy, and yet so universal that 40 million people bought it anyway. But if you'd like a bit more of an explanation, follow me. Welcome. I'm Kira, and this is your beauty blueprint. I've spent a whole week researching, watching, and editing all things Björk to bring you her very essence and share the best of my findings. And to be honest, I came out the other side a little altered. So what exactly are the ingredients of this woman's unmistakable, almost extraterrestrial persona? How does a 5'4" introvert from a hippie commune in Reykjavik become the most boundary-dissolving force in modern music? 16 Grammy nominations, Best Actress at Cannes, a retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art, and a wardrobe that belongs in a fever dream. Sure, part of it is voice, that 4-octave instrument that can shift from a whisper to a war cry in a single breath. Another part is nerve, the willingness to walk into a room full of men who take credit for her beats and simply outlast them. And part of it is something harder to name, a deep, almost geological patience with her own becoming. She never arrived all at once. She kept erupting. And do stick around, because by the end of this video, I'll even serve us a quick breakdown of what we can learn, very, very practically speaking, from Björk's unique style universe. Oh, and one more thing before we dive in, I designed a Björk-inspired t-shirt just for us, so keep an eye on the link in the description if that's your thing. It's a little unhinged, and it's very much in the spirit of everything we're about to discuss. Meanwhile, we have gathered quite a range there, so please do check that out. They are super soft, shipped to and fro all over our little globe. And I thank everyone who ever got one, and especially whoever reported back on it. It is not only a great way of supporting this channel, but also means the world to me, to be able to be a part of your beauty journey. Now then, settle in, pour yourself something sharp and a little wild, maybe a shot of Brennivin, Iceland's beloved caraway schnapps, or some aquavit on ice if you want to feel the frost, and let's begin by understanding who Björk actually was before she became Björk. Here's a little backstory. She was born November 21st, 1965 in Reykjavik to an electrician father who led a union and a mother who was a full-blooded environmental activist, the kind who chains herself to things. Her parents split almost immediately, and little Björk was raised in a commune, surrounded by artists, musicians, and the particular brand of benign chaos that Iceland does so well. Her stepfather was a guitarist they called the Jimi Hendrix of Iceland. She did not have a boring childhood. At 6, she enrolled in music school. At 11, she recorded a solo album, covers of the Beatles and Stevie Wonder translated into Icelandic, plus an original instrumental she composed herself. It went gold. They offered her a second record. She said no and bought a piano instead. That refusal, at 11, is probably the earliest glimpse of the woman she would become. Someone who understood, on some cellular level, that doing the expected thing was the enemy of doing the real thing. Her teenage years in Reykjavik were a blur of bands with unprintable names. Spit and Snot, Tappi Tíkarrass, which translates, roughly, to Cork the Bitch's Ass, and the gothic post-punk group KUKL, which signed to the UK anarchist label Crass Records. Through KUKL, she met 2 people who would shape her life, guitarist Thor Eldon, whom she married, and poet Sjónn, who would become her lifelong lyrical collaborator. Then came the Sugar Cubes. They formed from the wreckage of KUKL as part of an arts collective called Smekklisa, which means bad taste, and their debut single, Birthday, became the single of the week. Their first album sold over 1 million copies worldwide. the first Icelandic record to do that, ever. Rolling Stone crowned them the biggest rock band to emerge from Iceland. They did SNL. They were funny, anarchic, and thrilling, and Björk was already outgrowing them. Her marriage to Thor Eldon was over almost before it began. Their son Sindri was born the exact same day the Sugar Cubes officially formed, and they divorced before the year was out. They kept performing together for 6 more years, which is very Icelandic of them. The band dissolved in 1992, and Björk moved to London. And in July 1993, she released Debut, a record that blended electronic textures, house, jazz, and trip-hop into something nobody had a name for yet. It became the album of the year. It won 2 Brit Awards. It sold 3 million copies. And it launched a creative partnership with Micelle Gondry, 8 music videos together that turned MTV into her art gallery. What followed was a career that made reinvention look like a natural biological function. Post was extroverted London energy, trip-hop, techno, big band brass. Homogenic, dressed in an Alexander McQueen kimono, photographed by Nick Knight, combined Icelandic strings with electronic beats so powerfully that many critics consider it her first genuine masterpiece. Vespertine was hushed, domestic, erotic, built from the sounds of shuffling cards and cracking ice. Medulla was composed almost entirely from human voices, beatboxers, throat singers, Icelandic choirs. Biophilia was the world's first app album, featuring custom instruments like a gravity harp and MIDI-controlled Tesla coils, and it became the first app admitted into MoMA's permanent collection. And then there was Vulnicura, but we'll get to that. In 2000, she took a detour that nobody saw coming. She starred in Lars von Trier's Dancer in the Dark, playing a Czech immigrant factory worker going blind. Have you seen it yet? She won Best Actress at Cannes. The film won the Palme d'Or. I've Seen It All, the soundtrack, was nominated for an Academy Award, and she hated every second of making it. She later described the shoot as the most agonizing experience of her career, and during the Me Too movement, she accused von Trier of sexual harassment. Unwanted physical contact, persistent sexual propositions, retaliation. When she refused, it's worth pausing on that for a moment. She stepped completely outside her art form, delivered a performance that made a festival full of seasoned film critics weep, and the price she paid for it was a director who wouldn't keep his hands to himself. The courage it takes to tell that story publicly, years later, is its own kind of achievement. And then there was the Stalker. Ricardo Lopez, a 21-year-old pest exterminator from Florida, had been obsessed with Björk since 1993. 803 pages of handwritten diary, 408 references to her, 22 hours of video testimony. When he learned she was dating Goldie, something broke. Partly jealousy, partly racism. He built a sulfuric acid letter bomb concealed inside a hollowed-out book and mailed it to her London address. Then he recorded his own end on camera. His body was discovered 4 days later, when blood seeped through the ceiling of his apartment. Florida police alerted Scotland Yard. The package was intercepted at a South London post office, 1 stop from delivery, 1 postal stop from her face. Björk appeared outside her home, visibly shaken but composed, expressed sadness, and sent wishes to Lopez's family. She relocated from London to Spain, and there, in the aftermath of the most terrifying thing that had ever happened to her, she wrote Homogenic, the album many consider her greatest. That's how she processes the unprocessable. She turns it into art. Frequency. Because first, let's talk about love, the engine that drives nearly everything she's ever made, and nearly all artworks anyway. After her marriage to Thor Eldon came a string of relationships that read like a who's who of the 90s cool. French video director Stéphane Sednaoui, who shot the post cover and directed Big Time Sensuality. Their breakup gave her, possibly maybe, her first sad song, and she felt ashamed writing it because it didn't offer hope. Then a brief charged affair with trip-hop pioneer Tricky, who later admitted she asked if he loved her and he said no, and then it all went up in the air. Then an engagement to drum and bass king Goldie, who ended it because he wasn't ready. But the love that cracked her open, the one that remade her sound from the inside, was Matthew Barney, the American visual artist. They met around 2000 in New York's art world. Their daughter Isadora was born in 2002. They were never married but lived together in Brooklyn Heights, and their relationship mapped directly onto her discography like a seismic reading. Vespertine, originally titled Domestica, was The Honeymoon, all whispered eroticism and microscopic textures. Cocoon was explicitly sexual. Pagan poetry was the ecstatic declaration, I love him, I love him, I love him. Yet, they separated in 2013. And what came next was Vulnicura, an autopsy of a relationship with songs arranged chronologically around the moment of rupture. Stone Milker, 9 months before. History of Touches, 3 months before. Black Lake, 2 months after a 10-minute devastation that opens the chest cavity. Family, 6 months after, where she mourned our miraculous triangle. Father, mother, child. The Washington Post compared it to a musical snuff film. She told Pitchfork it was the most painful thing I ever experienced in my life. The only way I could deal with that was to start writing. Barney filed a custody lawsuit. Love for Björk was never background music. It was the music. Now, you might think you know where this story goes from here. The heartbroken artist rebuilds in solitude, finds peace, credits therapy, but Björk doesn't do what you expect. She never has. What she did next will genuinely surprise you, and it connects to something we can all use. So stay with me, and if you're finding this interesting so far, consider hitting the subscribe button so you don't miss future videos like this. Leave a comment. I obviously really want to hear your thoughts on Björk. And if you want to go even deeper, become a channel member or Patreon to access members-only podcast episodes. To our current members, thank you, you gorgeous people. So what is it exactly that makes Björk not just a musician, but a phenomenon? Björk is one of the rare artists who embodies the archaic feminine, not the polished, domesticated femininity of pop culture, but something older and wilder, the volcano goddess. The woman who exists at the intersection of nature and technology, whose sensuality is a force of nature rather than decorative. She doesn't use her body as currency the way the industry insists its women should. She uses costume to obscure the body, to transform it. That's what her famous collaborators have always understood. Alexander McQueen designed the homogenic kimono, the pearl-stitched bridal gown for the pagan poetry video, and a bell dress covered in thousands of hand-applied bells, shipped to Iceland with no further discussion or fittings. That was the level of trust. She performed at his memorial service in 2010, and if you watch the footage, you understand that their relationship was not designer and client, but something closer to two dialects of the same language. Iris van Herpen built her architectural, 3D printed pieces that became bioluminescent creatures on stage, and Gucci's Alessandro Michele gown for the Gate video took 870 hours to construct. Chris Cunningham's video for All Is Full of Love, 2 robotic Björks in an intimate embrace, lives in MoMA's permanent collection, and directly inspired the opening titles of Westworld. These aren't clothes or videos, they're much more than that. And then there's the feminism. Bracingly specific, never abstract. In a 2015 Pitchfork interview, she revealed she'd done 80% of the beats on Vespertine, spent 3 years on them, and yet the producers Matt Moss, who came in for the last 2 weeks to add percussion, were credited everywhere as the architects of the whole record. She compared her treatment to Kanye West's. He got all the best beatmakers on the planet to make beats for him. A lot of the time he wasn't even there, yet no one would question his authorship for a second. Her conclusion: everything that a guy says once, you have to say 5 times. Otherwise, her thesis that runs through every album, every interview, every visual choice, is the reconciliation of nature and technology. She told McQueen that their generation's mission was trying to make friends between nature and technology. She called this synthesis the feminine principle. If you can make nature and technology friends, then you can make everyone friends. That's what women do a lot. They're the glue. This isn't just woo-woo mysticism. It's why her videos feature robotic versions of herself making love, why her instruments are built from pendulums and Tesla coils, why her album about heartbreak was produced with electronic artist Arca, and why her album about grief was inspired by mushrooms, organisms that are neither fully plant nor fully animal, but the connective tissue of the forest floor. The woman thinks in ecosystems. She was shouting Tibet, Tibet at a concert in Shanghai, before most Western artists had figured out how to spell the word activism. China's Ministry of Culture denounced her, said she hurt the feelings of the Chinese people, and subsequently enacted regulations banning artists who threatened national unity, a policy that affected Oasis and Bob Dylan. She has co-founded environmental organizations, set up venture capital funds during Iceland's financial crisis, campaigned against hydropower projects that threatened the highlands, and in 2025 publicly demanded that Iceland withdraw from Eurovision over Israel's inclusion. She doesn't post black squares, she rearranges things. Now, Here's something I found absolutely fascinating, and I think it might be the single most useful insight from all of this. Björk's approach to self-presentation is not about looking beautiful. It is about becoming unrecognizable to yourself. That sounds paradoxical, but it's the key to her entire aesthetic, and it's something any one of us can apply, whether we ever touch a Tesla coil or not. So don't go anywhere. Alright, as promised, let's talk beauty, let's talk the practical blueprint. First, understand the philosophy. Björk treats style as inseparable from whatever she's creating at the moment. Each album era generates its own visual world, not to decorate the music, but to become the artwork in a different medium. An academic paper in fashion theory analyzed how she strategically uses fashion as a performative process, constantly in a state of becoming and transformation. That's the core lesson. Your look is not a costume you put on. It's an extension of what you're currently feeling, thinking, and making. Now for the specifics. Her makeup artist Hungry described the process. There was a lot of talking about how the character would feel, how the character has to read towards the audience, and then translating that into a silhouette. For the Foster era, they went with something lively, organic, and feminine. Lots of red, lots of blush, pronounced eye makeup. Sometimes they decorated her eyebrows with Swarovski crystals for a floral effect. What can you take from this? 3 things. 1. Think character first, product second. Before you reach for a palette, ask yourself what you're trying to express, not what's trending. 2. Your face is terrain, not a canvas. Her makeup artist, Hungry, doesn't just paint Björk's face. He sculpts it. He builds prosthetic cheekbones, extends brow lines, creates alien geometry. You don't need prosthetics to think this way. A strong blush placement or an unexpected lip outline can redefine the architecture of your face. Think creativity, not decoration. 3. Masks are liberation. James Mary has crafted over 70 masks for Björk. Lace and pearl, silicone orchid face pieces, thermoplastic headpieces. Björk herself said, "With phones and selfie culture, it's weird energy. With masks, I feel protected." James Mary added that they allow her to be more generous in public. Being an introvert in an extrovert's job is a complicated thing. You don't need a literal mask, but you do need the principle. A signature accessory, a statement piece, something that functions as armor while also being beautiful. Remember Daphne Guinness's diamond glove? Well, something that lets you walk into a room feeling shielded and seen at the same time. Her style milestones are worth studying. The Hussein Chalian airmail envelope jacket for the post cover, the voluminous pink tall lantern dress at Cannes in 2000, the mycelium wig by Tomohiro Kono for Fasora, and of course the swan, the Marjan Pajoski swan dress at the 2001 Oscars, which was torn apart by every fashion commentator alive and has since been exhibited at MoMA, featured in the Met's Camp Notes on Fashion show, and voted one of the most impactful red carpet moments in history. Joan Rivers said she should be put into an asylum. Björk's response, "It's just a dress." That confidence, the refusal to explain or shrink, is maybe the most transferable beauty tip she's ever offered. She also has a rule that's worth stealing. I do try and wear stuff by unknown designers, and I make sure I pay because, if nothing else, I have money. The takeaway? Don't chase names, chase vision. Find makers who see the world oddly, uniquely, and invest in their work. Your wardrobe will be more interesting and more you than anything a luxury house billboard is trying to sell you. Now, to answer the question I left dangling, what did Björk do after Volnacura? She didn't retreat. She made Utopia, which she called her Tinder album, the sound of a woman learning to desire again. One track, Sue Me, addressed the child custody battle directly. Then came Fasora in 2022, her first record as sole producer. It contains Victimhood, where she scolds herself for wallowing too long in martyrdom, and Her Mother's House, a duet with her daughter Isadora that is one of the most tender acts of intergenerational release I've ever heard. So she didn't just survive. She composted her grief and grew something from it. That is the Björk method. So what does Björk have to tell the rest of us? She tells us that creativity is pranksterish and slippery, that the trick is not to force it and put it up against a wall, but sniff it out with a lot of kindness. She tells us that bravery is this gut feeling to not coagulate or crystallize, but to stay liquid. She tells us that loneliness is a fiction. I never really understood the word loneliness. As far as I was concerned, I was in an orgy with the sky and the ocean, and with nature. She tells us that a computer has no more or less soul than a guitar. It's all about what you bring to it. She tells us that if you're still growing, you're not done, and that she still feels like she has 1,000 songs left to write. She tells us, and this is the one that matters most, that the answer is always yourself. Iceland set a world record, she once said. When we were asked what we believe, 90% said, ourselves. I think I'm in that group. If I get into trouble, there's no God to sort me out. I have to do it myself. That's the real blueprint. Not the swan dress, not even the voice. It's the belief that your own strangeness is the most valuable material you possess, and that the job of a lifetime is to keep shaping it. Björk is 60 now. She has survived a bomb that was one postal stop away from melting her face. She has turned the most private devastation into music that strangers play when they need kindness and permission to fall apart a little. She has dressed in mushrooms and orchids and mechanical swans. She has told every man who ever took credit for her beats exactly where to put his name. And she is not done. She is still liquid, still refusing to crystallize. Thank you for watching, my beautiful friend. I've queued up the next chapter for you here. I'll see you soon. Love, Kira. Now go create your own blueprint.